evening. Thanks for joining us here on the Fine Print. I'm Aisha Sindhu. The much talked about summit between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and China's President Xi Jinping is just 3 short days away. In the last 11 days, WION has kept you ahead on all developments on this front, and it continues to be our focus tonight as well. We start with an in-depth look at the rare 2-day meeting between the two leaders and what's likely going to happen. Sources have told WION that this meeting's format will be different from that of a summit. We're given to understand that there won't be any fixed agenda. Neither can we expect the leaders to issue a joint statement after their discussions. The aim of these talks is to have broad and overarching conversations as well. Now, sources say that the purpose of this meeting is to understand the domestic issues and foreign policy of both sides, in an attempt to get rid of any misunderstandings that may already exist. Now, what it looks like is this, that both sides are trying to put Doklam behind them for the Wuhan dialogue. This is an attempt by both India and China to cut down on the long list of their differences. According to sources, both sides recognize that greater communication at the political level is needed. This 2-day engagement will give Prime Minister Narendra Modi the opportunity to build a personal rapport with President Xi ahead of June's Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO summit. Since taking office, Prime Minister Modi has tried to develop a personal relationship with many world leaders. China says that at Wuhan, both leaders will exchange views on overarching and long-term strategic issues. They're also expected to discuss the latest trends around the world, those that need to be closely followed and debated. Right, so when it comes to this meeting and what to expect, we're sure of what not to expect, but really speaking, what is going to come up for conversation. Nandan Unnikrishnan, Senior Fellow with the Observer Research Foundation, is with me on the show from New Delhi to unpack that big question. Nandan, good evening. Thanks for making the time to join us here on WION. No diplomats, no joint statement, not even a meeting in Beijing. What should we be watching out for?
Well, you know, there has been substantial tension in the relationship in particularly 2016, 2017. So this is an attempt to try and diffuse the tensions and see if we can find common ground to solve some of these differences. The big picture is really that India has a humongous number of developmental challenges. It has to go through substantial reforms economically, politically, socially. And to do this, it needs focus on internal matters. So it does not need external distractions. And therefore, Mr. Narendra Modi is reaching out to the Chinese leadership to try and engage with them and ensure that we understand each other's red lines and that we don't spring surprises on each other in the coming years.
Right. You mentioned common ground. Can I ask you, would you describe this meeting as one on equal footing, or do you feel someone has the edge over the other over here?
Well, I don't think that is the way to approach it. I mean, you know, in theory, China is a much bigger country. It's a much bigger economy and everything. So theoretically, they should be on the higher pedestal if you want. But I don't think that is the way either of the countries are approaching it. Both of them recognize that the world is going through a tremendous transition. There is a lot of uncertainty in how or what will be the new world that is evolving. And therefore, the great powers would like to reduce the areas of tension amongst each other because they don't really need distractions. And I think this summit should be seen in that light.
Fair enough. And we are also given to understand that this hasn't been, you know, an overnight sort of a development that's taken place, that both sides have had a change of heart. There has been a concerted effort that's been going on, you know, behind the scenes, and also helped along, I suppose, by the US-China trade war, the US-Kim meet that seems to be coming up, if it will, and of course India taking part in the quadrilateral. Do you think these elements have also helped reach this point of Modi and Xi meeting as early as Friday?
Well, undoubtedly the tensions between USA and China have played a role in China wanting to engage with India and not have distractions, as it were, because that is the main challenge that the Chinese leadership at this point is facing. Similarly, I mean, it is not that India is without external challenges and without its own internal problems. So therefore, India has also sought. So I would say this is in a sense, a confluence of interests on both sides to reach out to each other and try and minimize the possibility of any kind of hostility or conflict or confrontation, bringing in a layer on their normal relationship.
And when it comes to the two men at the center of this, they are well respected in both their countries. Xi, of course, has consolidated his position very recently. But for Prime Minister Modi, Nandan, do you think this is a bit of a gamble, considering next year is the general election, and he has been accused of, wrong-footing foreign diplomacy every now and then by the opposition? So is this a big challenge for the Indian Prime Minister?
Well, I think 2019 is on the mind of Mr. Modi, undoubtedly. As any politician, if I was a politician, I would be thinking about how to win my elections. So 2019 is something on his mind. And he definitely recognizes that the Chinese needling him on the border or springing a surprise closer to the election is not going to help him win. So undoubtedly that plays a significant part. But more than that, I think he is also putting forth the understanding, or rather, he understands that the world itself is going through a very uncertain transitory phase from what was a unipolar world to something that is not yet defined. It could be multipolar, it could be bipolar, but whatever emerges, and that during this transition, India is also caught up in having to manage its own internal problems. So therefore, these are, I think the bigger picture is what dominates, although undoubtedly 2019 is on his mind.
Okay, so a vantage point discussion perhaps, not the nitty-gritties on the ground. Can I ask you what you think of keeping diplomats out of this discussion? We're given to understand it's only going to be Xi and Mr. Modi and, of course, their interpreters who are going to be there at this summit. Do you think that that is indicative of a larger problem plaguing conversations when it comes to diplomacy between the two sides?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that Mr. Xi and Mr. Modi picked up the phone and discussed the modalities of how they will meet, where they will meet, over how many days, and all that. Obviously, diplomats played a role, officials played a role, and while the meeting may be unscripted, the topics and what they will discuss is quite clear to both the leaders, and both the leaders have clear-cut understanding of what their positions are. This is an attempt to see what the position of the other side is, see if there is any way that a compromise can be achieved, and how to marry the interests of both countries in a manner that is beneficial to both. And these are political decisions. These are not decisions to be taken by bureaucrats. So it's but natural that the politicians are talking to each other.